Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. My name's Chris, and we'll be going over Leetcode problem number 181, which is a database problem that we'll be using MySQL to solve. And the title of this problem is Employees Earning More Than Their Managers. So the first thing we see when we open up this problem is a table named Employee, and in this we see column names ID, name, salary, and manager ID. If we scroll down to our prompt here, the question we want to answer or that we want to select and return a table for is write an SQL query to find the employees who earn more than their managers. Return the result in any order. So we only want to return the employee name, which we can see here in this example output, and that is only whenever this employee has a manager, so we can see manager IDs 3 and 4 for these two employee IDs 1 and 2. So in this case, Joe's manager would be manager ID 3, which coincides with ID 3, which means Sam is Joe's manager and Max is Henry's manager. So to get started, what we're first going to want to do is find a way to compare these rows where we can find an ID, and then if that person has a manager ID, we want to select that manager ID and compare it to the ID that we're looking for based on salary. So how we're going to first do this is in SQL, you can basically make two of the same table, and in this case we're going to start with a select statement, and we want to select a name, so we can just start out by saying that, and then they want to return, as we can see in this output, that they want the column name that we return to be employee. So the way you do this in SQL is with your select statement, you type in the column name that you are actually retrieving, and then you can rename it using an as statement. So in this case, we will put an as, and then case sensitive, we'll do employee. So that takes care of our initial select statement. But now we need to go through and compare these two. And the way we're going to do that is first by making these two tables that I mentioned earlier. And the way you do that is just do a from statement. And from is going to say which table are we selecting these name columns from. So we can do employee and just give that some kind of indicator, which in this case I'll do E1. And then we can also just put a comma, and then we will just do a duplicate. So we're going to just select employee table again. And I just noticed that employee is given to us capitalized, so we need to match that so SQL can see which table we're drawing from. So now E1 will be the first table that we're selecting, and then this duplicate table will just be named E2. And this can really be named anything you want it to be, and it's just whatever makes sense to you and what allows you to track it. So in our select statement now, we have two tables, so we want to select which one we're going to be returning from. So in this case, employee 2 is more of a tool we're using so that we can compare two different, we can compare rows from our first table to rows of our second table. And so we want the employee name from the employee 1 table, which we named E1. And the only way you delineate that here is just by putting whatever your like little file case here in front of your name or your column name. So in this case, we'll just do E1.name. And that's going to say we're selecting the name column from the E1 table. And so now we have the framework for what column we're returning and from which table. So now we have to find a way to compare these two tables in a case where we're selecting only those that are specified in the problem layout. So we want to find the employees who earn more than their managers. So we're wanting to compare E1 manager ID to E2 ID. So that way we're selecting the manager from table E1 and then setting that ID equal to the E2 ID. So in this case, we'll do where E1 dot manager ID, and ID is capitalized, and we're going to say equals E2 dot ID. So in that case, if we look here, what's that going to do in this sample case? E1 dot manager ID. So that's saying our first table, we're going to look at manager ID, and then E2, we're going to assign that to be the ID. So manager IDs for E1 are 3 and 4, and then that says in table E2, that's going to be the ID that we're looking at. So in that case, 3 and 4 were the manager IDs from E1, so 3 and 4 will be the IDs for table 2 or E2, and that'll be Sam and Max, which are the managers of Joe and Henry. So then that'll first give us the matchup of manager to employee, and then we're also going to want an AND statement in this case, because all this does at first is give us the employee manager matches, and we can see that if we run this code. What we see is we return Joe and Henry as the employees, and we can actually get this a little bit further if we also return E2 dot name. And we can just say as employee is going to be here, and then we can say as manager here. And all this is going to do is just show you what the table looks like at this point. So as we see, the employee will be Joe, and in this case, his manager is Sam, which makes sense if we look at the test case. And then Henry is paired up with Max, which also makes sense according to the test case. So we're just going to reset this back to how it was by taking this E2 name and manager off. And then now we want to narrow this down further to where employee is making more than manager. So how we do that is, now that we have E1 as the employee and E2 as manager, we can just compare those two salaries. And what that's going to look like is just putting an AND statement, which you can just pile these on to further and further condense down what you're looking for. So in this case, we're going to do AND E1 dot salary, which is going to be the salary for Joe and Henry, is greater than E2 dot salary, which is saying E2 salary is just $60,000 and $90,000 for Sam and Max. So if we run this code now, we should only see where Joe is making more than Sam, because Joe is making $70,000 and his manager, which is Sam, is making $60,000. So if we run this code now, we can see that Henry was left off, and this is just returning Joe. So this was my solution to Leetcode question number 181, employees earning more than their managers. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, and if you would like to suggest how you would have approached this problem or problems that you would like to see me solve in the future, please leave those down below in the comments, and would like to thank you for joining me today, and make sure you subscribe to see my approaches to these problems going forward.